No, we don't have any nails. This is a convenience store. The duck then asks, well, do you have any grapes?
Yes.
I'm lost.
Hazel, is there a cure for this?
It doesn't get any better than that.
No, it doesn't. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Digital Download, our weekly chat about all things digital, all things business, all things life. Once again, we've got our favourite mental health practitioner, Dr. Hazel Harrison, who's joining us. Again, she hasn't been with us. We worked out for nearly a year. So it's lovely to have you back. You sent me a little note about this, saying you would like to talk about today. There are many factors that influence our well-being, but research has consistently found one big predictor of happiness long-term is our relationships. So why do they matter so much, and how can we foster positive relationships? So before we get into that, let's go around the group and introduce ourselves. Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite, and I'm famous for writing the book, Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, a proud DLA Ignite partner. I'm not famous for writing anything yet.
Oh, watch this space.
Watch this space, the professor.
That's right.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Alex Abbott. I'm the founder of Sapiro. I'm famous for the bearded sales guy. Well, maybe not, but you know.
You're infamous.
Infamous. I'm also famous for providing the training for the social selling and influence program that Tim is famous for writing the book for.
Hi, I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite. Tim is my business partner, and I'm famous for being Tim's business partner, really. And frankly, that's enough. But most importantly, Dr. Hazel Harrison, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Hazel Harrison. I'm not famous, and I'm very happy not being famous. I am.
We're not either.
And I founded ThinkAvellana really with this big mission of how we bring psychology more into our conversations, into our everyday life, so that we can all learn a bit more about how we can take care of our mental health, how we can take care of each other, and how we can get our communities thriving, really, is what's been my big mission. So thank you for having me back, because we had a really great chat last time I came, and then we were like, we have to have part two. And so finally we have found a good gap to have part two. So thank you.
Yeah, it's almost like the second of those great Ken Robinson TED Talks, isn't it? Where he does his first talk and he comes back to do his second talk 4 years later or whatever it is. And he steps out on the stage and he says, so as I was saying, and then launches into it. And kind of it's the way that you talk about stuff is so lovely because it's very conversational. So it fits in very well with the way that we run this show. It doesn't feel like you've prepped a pitch. It feels like you're just kind of going with the flow and seeing how which reminds me, I've just turned on the comments. I've forgotten to do that. How the way the conversation goes opens up new avenues and we explore those. So when we were chatting about what you were going to talk about this time, you said, can we talk about relationships, connection, and belonging, and how those drive long-term happiness?
Yeah.
So I think that increasingly people's well-being and happiness and sense of purpose and sense of joy that they get in living their life is increasingly moving onto people's radar as something that they need to be working on and mindful of. And I guess because most of us begin our working lives by viewing the destination that we're going towards. I'm going to retire when I'm 50, a multi-millionaire. Then as we get into our work, actually we realize that it's not about the destination. It's about the journey of getting to the destination. And every day could be your last. And if you're not enjoying the journey and each day, then you can have a pretty grim time. So unpack this for us.
Okay. Well, Let me start. Rob will like this because this is what they've been doing over in Harvard and surrounding areas. I think it's 80 something years ago now. They started the longest running longitudinal study following a group of young men who were at Harvard, and then contrasting those with a group of young men who were in schools, in other schools in Boston, perhaps coming more traditionally from kind of more deprived areas of Boston. And they decided to follow these young men from when they were 14 and see what happens, and take a variety of measures of their mental and physical health, start to track what they earned as they graduated, which ones got married, who went off to live somewhere else, what were the things that started to influence how they lived their lives. And then they followed their children and now their children's children. And there are some great TED Talks that are based around this research. And then more recently, Robert Waldringer, who is the current director of the program, has just published a book kind of trying to summarize what they found. So I've been reading this over the summer and really enjoying it. And one of the reasons I really like it is because they have so much data, so much rich data. You imagine that there are these people that they're following, and then every year or so they send a research graduate out to sit in their home and to ask them all these questions about how meaningful is your life now, how warm are your relationships, how much money are you earning, you know, how are you spending your holidays, and gathering data, really rich data on what seems to be influencing their lives and influencing their well-being. And I suppose the, you know, spoiler alert is that it generally comes down to the warmth and sense of connection they have with others and their relationships that is one of the biggest predictors of their happiness and their well-being long term. And often not the things that, like you were alluding to at the start there, Adam, you know, that how much money we might earn or think that we're going to earn. And when we get to that point, that's when we might feel happy, or when we get to a particular role in a particular, you know, career ladder, that's when we'll feel this happiness. And actually those are fairly poor predictors of our well-being. So it is about cultivating these kind of rich and meaningful relationships. And there wasn't really a difference between those young people who'd gone to Harvard and those young people who hadn't. That was not a predictor at all as to, you know, who ended up living a happier life or a healthier life. So I suppose for me, it really cements what I'm interested in, and also what I think matters. It is about our relationships and our connections with each other that make a difference to how we experience our days and our moments. And I'm really curious to think about, you know, how do we shift our focus back to realizing that is the thing that's going to matter, when we can be so easily seduced into believing that it's if we get this car or this new shiny MacBook, we were just having a talk about tech, or whatever it might be, that we might think is going to make us happy, and then we very quickly adapt to it and it doesn't anymore.
It is making me happy, just saying.
I know. And the button that comes on with it did make me happy for a while too. So you're fine.
As much as any Mac can.
Yeah.
What was the research called? That sounds really interesting.
And do you have the book name?
So yes, right. So the research gets kind of dubbed the Harvard longitudinal study as a sort of shorthand version. I think there is a longer version, and the book is called The Good Life, and it is Robert Waldringer and his director of the program, Mark Schultz, I think his name is. Sorry, Mark, that if you're ever watching this and I can't remember the co-author. I think it's really beautiful because it pulls out verbatim conversations that I had. And I really like that aspect of it too. You know, it's not just the numbers, it's about what Dorothy, who now lives in Pennsylvania, said about her husband, you know, Frank, and their life together. I enjoyed it.
So I find that very easy to believe. As I've got older, I've realised much more joy for me comes from the people that I interact with, and I'm being much better about choosing those people, being mindful of the people that I'm choosing to spend time with now. But and I think that most people listening would probably not dispute the findings of this study. But how can we use that knowledge? It's a fact now rather than opinion. How can we use that knowledge to make better decisions in order that we can be happier tomorrow than we were yesterday?
Yes, which is a great conversation. And now we can talk about some research over in the UK and Robin Dunbar, who's over at Oxford University. And you may or may not be familiar with, he has a number named after him, which I think is awesome. And if I was going to be famous, maybe I could have a number.
Harrison's number.
Sorry?
Harrison's number. That would be
yes, exactly. So Robin Dunbar started to try and understand the size of our social networks. I don't know if you've ever come across some of this research and to see like how many people we could actually sort of maintain relationship with.
It's 130, isn't it? Isn't it about
150?
150, sorry.
Yeah. Ish, give or take, like probably 50. I mean, some people have more, some people have less. And
so for those that don't know, Hazel, can you explain?
I will explain it. I will. So basically, we can think about it a little bit like dropping a pebble into a pond, and you have those like ever increasing ripples that go out further, and the bigger ripples, closer to the pebble and further away, which is quite a helpful way of thinking about how we maintain our relationships. So that first sort of ripple is quite a small circle, and those are the people who we will have the closest relationships with, and that number tends to be around 5, and then we go out a bit further, and within that, including those 5, we get another 10 who are kind of closer friends, and then outside of that, and it keeps going until we get to about 150. And the theory is that we have evolved to have this very social brain, which means that we can't really hold and maintain a connection with others beyond 150, because actually that's quite a big time investment, and maintaining relationships is about time too, and also about what we can remember and recollect and how we can meaningfully interact with others. And so we can probably remember, I think it's something like 1,000 faces, and we can remember like 500 of those names and faces. But as we come, further down, we can't really maintain more than about 150 friends. And that's sort of the number that you might think if you were going to have a really big party to celebrate, I don't know, a birthday or a wedding, or that's the kind of, that includes your family too. So, who you might invite to that. And some people go, oh, I've definitely not got that many people. You'd be surprised actually if you start to map them, but also maybe some people don't have that many, and that's okay. This is kind of talking about averages. But what I think is really interesting about this research is this idea that we can't possibly maintain the same degree of closeness and relationship with everyone in that network. Of course, we don't have enough resource to be able to do that. So we also have to focus in on, as Adam was talking about, the people who matter, the people who you want to spend time with, the people who you want to invest in and connect with. And they require an investment. If you let that go, those relationships will often just fizzle. Like, they require us to put something into them, and sometimes to get something back in order to maintain it. So I think, in answer to your question, Adam, about, so what do we do about this? I think the first thing is to know, okay, well, what does my Dunbar's number look like? Who are those people that matter to me, that I want to frequently connect with? And how do I maintain those connections? And what does that look like? And probably it will look very different for the types of friendships and relationships that you have, so people who may just send you, I don't know, an amusing WhatsApp joke every few days, they're investing in you and they're maintaining a connection with you, and that may be enough to sustain your relationship, so that then when you meet up in the pub in a few months' time, it's not starting afresh again, you're not starting over. And I thought, the other thing that's really interesting about some of Dunbar's work is the idea that actually friends that we make during the adolescent time and maybe early sort of 20s, they don't necessarily require the same maintenance now. So you may have friends where you can go, oh yeah, I can meet up with them. I've not seen them for 4 years. We can meet at the pub and have a catch up, or we can meet with our guitars and have a jam. And it's like we were together yesterday. But as adults, we don't tend to be able to fall into that same pattern. Our relationships need a bit more maintaining, week by week in order to do that.
I think, though, yes, I agree with you. I often think back to that social website, Friends Reunited, that appeared a few years ago. So you could meet up with all those friends that you lost touch with that you knew at school. And I often think to myself, the reason you lost touch with them was for a reason, and actually they're often best left. But joking aside, I think that one of the great things about social media is that it enables you to maintain relationships in a much more effortless way than before. So yeah, in the olden days, when I was young, it was an effort to see people. You had to drag yourselves out to play football or cricket or whatever with them, or you had to go to the pub, or you had to go and hang out with them, and that was a big investment of your time. And now, actually, it isn't. I mean, I would obviously, as you said, we have those circles of friends. So you have the people that you're closest to, that you interact with every day, and you have the people who are a ring outside that and a ring outside that. But certainly, I would class myself as having relationships and friends far more than 150 people now, as a result of social, because I state something or they state something and we come together on that thing, be it, so Yayan, he's a friend of mine. We often speak. He's a co-host of the music show that I do on a Friday. We're often chatting about music and other stuff. And Jess, we met her on this show, and she's going to be a host of the music show. And actually, these are all music shows. And Andrew, he's her co-host of music. But these are people, and we have these touch points, which means that we never go more than a couple of weeks or a couple of months without interacting again. And I think that now it's so easy for me to ping you a message, for example. Hi, Hazel, how's it going? Hope you're well, enjoying the summer, whatever it may be. And the overhead of my time to do that is much lower. And as a result of that, sometimes the message will land when you're too busy and you go, actually, I won't bother to get back to him because I'm busy doing other stuff. And sometimes it'll be at exactly the time when you think, oh, I've not spoken to him for ages, and it'd be great to have a chat. And I think that this is one of the most powerful things that humanity has on its side now. Not just the creation of these networks, but how we have embraced them. But not everyone feels that way.
Sorry, go for it, Tim. Sorry.
I was going to say, I'm just trying to add to one of those things about, and add to what Adam was saying about the fact that when somebody sends that connection or says hello or whatever, they're investing in you. And you should see it as that, and rejoice and celebrate that.
Yes, and hopefully it does feel like that, and maybe there are a variety of reasons why sometimes I do get a lot of messages on LinkedIn. Some people who I think genuinely want to build an interesting conversation, and some people who want to target me because I am running a particular business of a particular size, and they want to sell me something, and that doesn't feel so good, and that doesn't feel like they're investing in me. It feels like they're investing in themselves. And so I think maybe there's a conversation there too about how we approach people and how we build a conversation. And the reason I'm here is because Adam and I have had some conversations. I tend to not do lots of podcast interviews now, but because there are other things that I want to also do in my day, but I will if I feel like I'm connected with those people and I'm interested in actually continuing a conversation that we probably would have had on Zoom or somewhere else, and having it here instead. But I think one of the things about social media which is really interesting is the potential to connect with a very wide audience, right? And also to have conversations with strangers. So yes, we have this 150 people that maybe we feel connected to and that we might invite if we're having a big party, and that's part of our kind of well-being investment. But the research is also sharing it's really good for us to have conversations with people we don't know, you know, to interact with those who are strangers, not yet friends. I think it was Mike who said there are lots of people I want to have relationships with in the future. It's like that idea that you want to meet, you know, there are more people that you want to meet. And so I think social media allows us to start those interesting conversations, don't they? Like we see something that someone's posted. This is what happens to me. See something that someone's posted on LinkedIn that I think is really interesting. I'll either comment or I'll send them a message and say, I found that fascinating. Thanks so much for putting that up there. And, you know, sometimes you get responses back and sometimes you don't, and that's okay. But many an interesting conversation has come from that starting place. And then if we think about what impact does that have on the rest of our day? You know, like we probably just think about that as a moment in time and then we crack on with the project that we're working on. But what we don't realize perhaps is that has changed how we feel about our day, how we feel about the world, what we think about the project we're working on, maybe just giving us a little bit of a boost. And I think that's what's really interesting about, you know, feeling connected to others.
But that goes against a lot of the behaviors that we were taught as a child.
Yes.
So I was taught as a child not to be late for anything. I was taught as a child not to talk to strangers. And I know that a lot of people have not talking to strangers as an inbuilt behavior. And so actually I would challenge what you say. I would say that a lot of people come onto social media and find it extremely scary talking to people they don't know.
Yes, it takes practice, doesn't it? It's it is one of those things that we have to learn and learn what feels safe and what we feel comfortable with, and how to start a conversation with a stranger online,
and also the activity of what you're doing online, because sometimes things can come across as being something you don't like. For example, a friend of mine had someone sent him a connection request. So it was the other person, the stranger, that initiated the connection request. It didn't have any conversation at all. The person was worked in manufacturing. My friend put out a post this week about manufacturing and digital transformation. So he tagged this person in that, and the person on LinkedIn responded and actually put on the post, "Why have you tagged me in this?"
Yeah. There's etiquette that we're all trying to learn, right? About what is okay and what isn't okay, and there's probably cultural differences in that too, because we've not sat anywhere and had anyone explain to us how we're supposed to use this technology, right? We're all trying to figure out how are we using it, how are other people using it, but also how do I want to use it for me? You know, I think of it as, well, I'm often in my office writing, and when I am, how lovely to just have a brief conversation with someone, like you might if you're moving around your office with other people. It's sort of, for me, it becomes a substitute for that possibility of just having a chat.
Well, I think that the clue is in the name, isn't it? It's social media. And the concept of being social. You know, you don't go to an event, you don't go to a party or a networking event and someone walks up and says, "Hi, I'm Rob Durant," and you don't just fold your arms and turn around and walk away. You know, you shake hands with them and have a conversation with them. Clearly, you're going to turn around and walk away at some point, but early on, initially, you at least give them the benefit of the doubt. And I think that one of the things that's really challenging for some people, you know, further to Tim's point, is that this is kind of quite scary. You know, they've entered the world of social media to present an image of themselves, which is almost like an advert. And Jess says here about...
I think it's really just
a
great point, Jess.
If we present ourselves on social as our true selves and not as a persona, those relationships are formed more easily as they are genuine. It's important that you see what you get. And I think that this is absolutely crucial. You know, not everybody is going to like you, and that's kind of okay, because on LinkedIn, there's 950 million people. You don't want all of them to be your friend. But when you are authentically yourself is so good, because you attract people who like who you are, not who you're pretending to be. and B, it validates that you're actually an all right person. Because I think everybody has an underlying fear that they're not a good person. And when you are yourself and people go, oh, I really love that. Well, that was very kind of you. Or that's a fantastic idea. Or you're really clever. You go, that's nice. And like you said, it brightens your day and it changes the course of your whole day, doesn't it, when something like that happens?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we, to Tim's point as well, we have grown up probably being told that it's not a good idea to talk to strangers. And we also have a lot of preconceived ideas about what that might be. Like that other people won't want to talk to me. I think that's a big one. Oh, this person will be too busy. And maybe sometimes, they are. And that's okay. Like Adam's saying, you're not going to be for everyone. I'm not for everyone. You're not for everyone. That's all right. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you if people don't respond or don't connect back with you. And sometimes it is absolutely a timing thing, as you're saying, Adam, because there are definitely peaks in my year where I just feel I have a lot less time for social media, and sometimes when I feel like I have a lot more time for it. And sometimes when I just take a break from it because I actually want to be in real life with real people for a while too. And that might serve me better. So I often take August off and I don't spend a lot of time on social media because I actually want to be away from my desk as much as possible. And that's what works for me. And everyone will have finding out what works for them. But I think it is interesting to sort of start to test out some of the beliefs about, will people want to interact with me if I put something out? Because we tend to believe that people won't want to talk to us or that it won't be a positive experience. And those become barriers for us exploring or experimenting or finding out what might happen. And I think, the reason I'm so interested in the benefits of relationships is because the flip side of that we also know is that we are moving through what some describe as the loneliness pandemic now, where we know that experiencing prolonged periods of loneliness is very damaging for our mental and physical health. So
and is that a fallout from COVID, or just the nature of digitizing our working lives, do you think? Or both?
I think some of the data would say that it's pre-COVID, although I don't think that COVID helped. But definitely, you can see the numbers of friends that people had maybe back in the 70s compared to the number of friends that we might describe having now. I know we've talked about Dunbar's number, but in terms of, who you interact with on a regular basis face to face, I think that's changed quite a bit. And is diminishing, and particularly young people who are feeling very lonely and isolated.
What advice? So I do believe in the value of relationships and how good it is for someone's well-being. What advice would you give to someone that perhaps is active on social media but are quite happy to hide behind the fact that it's digital and not real life, because they're anxious to take that step to have more conversations with real people? And I do think that's a psychological thing. What advice would you give somebody that is feeling that?
Yeah, well, I think we have to be careful there, because some people do feel that that their relationships online are meeting their needs. And that's why I'm saying it's important to know what you need. What I know I need in the summer is to step away from my computer and be with my friends face to face. But that isn't what everyone needs. And some people might find that their quality of their online relationships actually meet their needs in a way that works for them. And that's why we're all different in this way. But I think what we do need within those relationships, regardless of the format that we find them in, is a sense of feeling that someone is holding us in mind, or that we matter, or that, like we were in that language we were using, of feeling that people are investing in us and that we're investing in them. And of course, there are many different ways that we can do that. But I think if you're feeling lonely and perhaps feeling that, so loneliness generally we define as the need that you have for social relationships and what you're actually experiencing, and whether if there's a big disconnect to what you need. Say if I needed to feel surrounded by people all the time, and whenever I wasn't, I felt lonely, whereas someone else might feel that they actually just need a couple of meaningful interactions throughout their week, and that meets that need. So it is a subjective thing. We can't kind of look at someone and go, well, they're lonely. It's about how we experience our relationships and whether they're meeting what we need. So if you are feeling that your relationships aren't quite meeting your needs, then I think possibly it's about starting to think about very small things you might be able to do to change that. Rather than kind of, I don't know, scrapping everything. I'm going to start building new friendships. Building friendships is a massive investment of time.
Yeah.
So it might also be thinking about friendships that you've not invested in for a while and what you could do to maybe reconnect with those. There can also be opportunities to feel a part of something without perhaps feeling like you've got friends there, by joining clubs or finding places where you feel that you have shared similar interests to other people, so you can build that kind of collective sense of belonging, and that's another good way to minimize loneliness. But I think it is also something that we need to talk about more, Alex, and I think that's one of the things that is difficult. Loneliness, by its definition, perhaps comes with this stigma that might mean that I'm not a very good friend, or not lovable, or not worthy of being around other people. And so we tend to want to hide those feelings of loneliness, instead of saying, if you work on your own all day, it's probably very normal to feel lonely at times, and kind of actually just name that and be able to say, do you know, I've realized this week I'm feeling quite lonely. I'd really love it if we could go out and do something, or,
Yeah.
How likely is it that people are even overtly aware of that feeling of loneliness? How often are we just walking through life not realizing that what we really need is to take a walk with a friend, or phone up somebody that we haven't spoken to in a while? It feels like we need to be intentional about these relationships, and that's almost a foreign concept.
It can be very challenging, absolutely. If it's not, this is what I live and breathe every day, so I try as much as I can to focus on it in my personal life too. But if this isn't something that you spend a lot of time thinking about, or get carried along with your day-to-day life, which happens to us all, it can be friendships can be things that very quickly drop off of our radar, because we've got to do X, Y, and Z, and we've got to make sure that that's done, and all of the jobs that might rise above it. And I think particularly because we don't necessarily understand, and we're hopefully getting a bit more understanding now of how beneficial they can be for us. If we're making time to exercise, if we're making time to eat well, it really is up there with those things. It is just as good for us as those things, but often falls down a bit.
And is there like a perfect thing to do? Because I think that what happens is that the media, because people start talking about it, of course, what happens is that then we get this discussion where people talk about the perfect world. And of course, we don't live in the perfect world.
No.
And actually, a text every 6 months is actually good enough to maintain the relationship. Whereas, actually walking with somebody or having a conversation with somebody is also good enough to have the relationship. But there's shades of grey in terms of on that spectrum of what a relationship is about. I'm asking that as a question, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's shades of grey because we, as I was saying, we have different needs in terms of what we want from our relationships, and relationships offer different things too. Esther Perel has done a lot of work and is amazing at communicating her ideas in relation to romantic relationships. But one of the things that she talks about is how we have such high expectations now for our romantic relationships, that we expect this person to be our best friend and our support,
to look like Brad Pitt.
To look like Brad Pitt, to earn X amount. All of these things that maybe we put onto one person that perhaps in previous generations we may have spread out. You know, you might have a friend that you confide in, and that might be different to your romantic partner who, you know. So I think there is that sense of actually how do you view your friendships and your relationships, and actually recognizing that they can't all give you the same thing. And that's important too, right? There'll be friends that you go to perhaps when you need particular kind of empathy or support, and they might be different to the friends who you go to say, I've got to move house, can you help me lift this sofa into the van, you know, or whatever it might be. You've got different networks of friendships, and they meet different needs, and hopefully you meet different needs for them too. But I think you're right. You know, it isn't that we may be presented with a kind of perfect worldview, and that's not necessarily very easy to maintain. But I do think using Dunbar's number as a model can be a helpful way of thinking about the layers in which you can connect with other people, and recognizing that you can't possibly give everyone the same amount of time or resource. You know, if you're thinking about it as an investment, then you're not sharing your resource equally amongst that group.
I was going to say about that, about sharing your resource evenly. There is another thing there, isn't there? And you know, often we feel guilty about putting ourselves first. So we all have friends that give selflessly to us. We also have friends, for whatever reason, that demand selfishly from us. People for whom we have to invest a lot of time. And how does one balance these things? Because, you know, friends that are in a tough place, they require a lot of support. But one of the things that we know from people's experience of counseling people that are going through a difficult time is that you can only counsel so many people and for so long, because, you know, you take a little bit of that yourself. So, you know, you're helping a friend and they're in a difficult place, and you have to keep investing in that. And it's a sink into which you pour your limited amount of energy. You may have lots of energy and lots of robustness and be in a really good place. But in the same way that you have an interaction with someone and it brings you joy and you go, oh, I feel really better, much better for that. Equally, you have an interaction with somebody and you feel worse as a result of that. So how does one remain a decent person, but also have a degree of selfishness as well?
Yeah, and I think, again, that probably comes back to the degree of connectedness with those people. There are, you know, and probably will be for you too, people in your network that you would drop everything for. And when they needed support, you know, you would be there. And that, I suppose, is real friendship. And then there are deal friends, right? Real friends and deal friends. This is Arthur Brooks over at Harvard as well. You know, we can have friendships that do exist very much on I've invested this in you, and now you have to invest that in me. And there's a kind of, you know, continual sort of transactional nature to that relationship. I've helped you out, now you help me out. And then there are those where it doesn't ever feel like that, or it isn't experienced like that, where it's much more about the ebb and flow of time and friendship. That means that probably maybe it balances out in the future, maybe it doesn't matter either way. But I think what you're also describing is how we look after our well-being when perhaps there are friendships that are drawing a lot on our and family too. You know, we're talking about relationships in a bigger picture. So family members who may need our support or our help, and actually how we then ensure that we are being topped up in some way to be able to provide that. And that's why we are in a network of people, and that's why we need a network of people around us, so that somebody in that network can possibly top us up, so we can top that person up, and, you know, that's how it works. But there will be times when everyone needs something from you and there's no one topping you up, and that's when we can feel very burnt out and depleted and perhaps not, and lonely, because it perhaps feels like our needs aren't being met in relationships that we're experiencing.
Alex, do you have a question?
Well, lots of thoughts, lots of questions. I was going to ask, well, what if you're in a role where you the expectation is that you meet new people? You're in a customer success or a sales role or a support role where you need to have those conversations with new people, but you're not comfortable doing it, but you're doing it because it's a job and you're earning money. I mean, you could question whether or not they're in the right job, but there's that feeling of anxiety having to speak to someone new. Not that I'm speaking from personal experience. Maybe years and years ago, when I did my first sort of networking event, I remember being incredibly scared. But I know people now that are sort of middle age, and they'd rather not have a conversation with somebody if they didn't have to.
Yes, and I think that we maybe not to use the terminology in too sort of concrete a way, but when we think about introversion and extroversion, and there are lots of different ways that we can define that and describe that, but one of the things that I feel I've learned about myself in more recent years is that I thought I was extroverted. And actually, when I go to events and conferences and speak as a keynote, speaker, what I realize is that sometimes those networking events cause me quite a lot of anxiety. That how do you start a conversation? Fine, put me up on the stage with my slides and I know what I'm going to say and here we go. But put me in a room with people that I don't know and I have to start something. And I think for me, what's been interesting is starting to learn that about myself. It's like I'm still learning stuff about myself. And when I know that, and I know, okay, so sometimes, Hazel, you find these events quite anxiety provoking. Think of a strategy, what's the best way forward? And actually almost kind of going through the motions of how I might engage with others, or what's a good conversation starter, and I've definitely learned lots from other people and watching other people. Some people are amazing at doing that, and when you watch what they do, you kind of go, oh, okay, they ask really good questions, or they comment on something that we're both sharing and experiencing at the same time. That's a really good technique to start a conversation with a stranger. The British love talking about the weather because we're all experiencing the same weather at the same time. It gives us a common ground to start talking about something, but really that's what it is, So I think recognizing that you may be someone who needs more time alone, and that's why it comes back to loneliness is about what you need, and we all have different needs. So recognizing how to manage that, particularly if you are in a job which is very social. Sometimes if I'm away at a conference for a few days, I would definitely try and make sure that I build in gaps where I give myself permission to go somewhere else and just recharge for a bit, and recognize that that's something that I need to do. And I don't have to feel bad about that. I just need a bit of a moment to, sit somewhere quiet and not be maintaining conversation. Because although I love that, it also makes me feel very tired.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I like to tell people I'm great at the middle of conversations. It's starting them that can be tricky. And
that's so true, Rob.
Icebreakers feel too trite very often. How do you develop that meaningful relationship when we start with, oh, it might rain? Okay.
And then once you get going, once you start and you realize that this person is happy to, it's like a game of tennis and you hit the ball over and they hit it back, and you realize that actually this is okay, then you can have something that feels perhaps a bit more interesting and a bit more connecting. But often doesn't start like that. And I don't know if I'd like it if they did. Someone started a conversation with, what do you think the meaning of life is? I would be like, whoa. I'm just trying to choose my carrots here in the supermarket.
I was going to say that, Tim.
So, I like Jess's answer. Jess says, my 8-year-old son had some great advice for making new friends. He said, tell them something you like about them, like their glasses. Then say your name and ask them about theirs.
There you go. It's actually as simple as that. And that is what the research would say, pay someone a compliment, highlight something that's positive. So Jess's son is onto a winner there.
Yeah, take that digital.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you said earlier, Hazel, about the idea that we're all still finding our way in this world. You know, we've had however many 100,000 years of interacting with people face to face, understanding, you know, looking at the physical clues as to whether or not they like us or not, whether or not what we've said has resonated with them or scared them or delighted them. And now we're in this environment where often people are rightly scared, because often you can say something, and by say I mean type something, and then it's there for posterity, and it can be misinterpreted, and it can come back and haunt you at a later stage. And I think that I mean, it comes back to what Jess said earlier about being authentic. You know, at the end of the day, if you are yourself, people that find that attractive walk towards you, and people that don't walk away. And that's a really good starting point for finding relationships. And, you know, I certainly know since COVID began, I've met many new people online, and many of those I count as being friends of mine now. And that wouldn't possibly have happened before COVID, even though there was a move towards digital. But certainly, yeah, we're all kind of walking through a minefield, aren't we? Tapping our feet and seeing what works and what doesn't.
And sometimes something works for a while and then it doesn't, you know, and that's the other thing, isn't it? We adjust and we adapt. And during COVID, we found ways to feel connected to people in other ways, because we couldn't maybe connect face to face. And I think we probably learned a lot about what works and what doesn't through some of those experiments. But then also we learned, like, oh, family quiz night's great for the first time, maybe the second time. By the 10th time, this is not fun anymore. You know? And we had to keep evolving and adapting and finding that novelty and that newness. And that, I think, is what as you're saying, Adam, that's continually what we're doing as humans as well. You know, trying to find what works for us and for each other.
Yeah, but we didn't have family quiz night. What we did have was family disco during COVID. We had a room that didn't have any furniture in.
Brilliant.
My wife arranged for us all to have a family disco and put a playlist together, and she bought one of those disco light things to put in the corner of the room. And yeah, we did that once. It was going to be a weekly thing, but it didn't turn out to be a weekly thing.
So Hazel, what you don't know about Adam is that he once did a disco dancing course.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, then stop the revising the psychology and mental health revisiting conversation, and we will now learn about this.
Yeah.
Do you know that a very good friend of mine who Tim has met, a guy called Scott White, who many years ago I was working with him, and I was first with my wife then, and we were out for drinks one evening, and he's one of those people that he's very gregarious and very chatty, and he's got a great sense of humor and loves to prank people. And we were chatting one day in a bar, and my wife said about the fact that I had disco lessons when I was younger, and he just went, "What did you say?" And I was like, no, we just don't. Anyway, this was Friday night. Monday morning, when I went into the office, everyone had come in like an hour and a half early and had hung up bunting that said "Dancing Queen" all around the office. It was a fairly grim time of my life.
Is it John Travolta style, Adam?
Yes,
Yeah.
It was John Travolta style.
Can you?
And I've only mentioned it live on social media.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. And that won't come back and haunt me, will it?
No one's listening anyway. So,
at what point can we revisit that room that just has the disco ball, and maybe just, you know, for your next LinkedIn post, just a little 10-minute?
Yeah.
That's definitely a video post.
Yeah.
I think so. No, I think not. But joking aside, because Alex has referenced a couple of times now, salespeople and the difficulty that they have in their role and the pressure that they're under to forge these relationships. So what can they do where they can get that joy from the interaction with people? if your job is to speak to people, how can you take joy from that element of the job rather than focusing on okay, well, we've had a call, we're going to have another call, we're going to have another call, and then a proposal, and then
Are you,
something.
before you answer that, Hazel, are you giving Adam permission to change the topic like that?
I'm sure she is.
It was a seamless transition back to the psychology of mental health, wasn't it? But we will now. The thing is, we know this about Adam, and it will keep coming back. Because, well, can I just say some sciencey bit about that too? Because that maybe that will help us to which is that dancing with other people is a really good way of feeling connected, like moving in sync. So it could be dancing, running with someone else, walking with someone else, doing something where you're in sync is actually, we know our brains like it. We feel better. So that's one of the reasons. I mean, there are many reasons why dancing is so much fun, but one of them is about that sense of feeling connected. And Kelly McGonigal wrote a book about movement, and she has a whole chapter based on kind of moving in sync and why that's so good for us in terms of our well-being. So there we go. We probably wouldn't have got to that had we not known about Adam's disco dancing classes.
As Andrew said, thanks, Tim. Thanks a million.
But seriously, then I suppose some of the research and ideas like Jane Dutton's work around high quality connections is this idea that our interactions offer us an opportunity to connect with someone. And that's the bit where we tend to feel where it's not transactional, but it's more that we are getting to know something about that person or meeting them in some place that feels authentic, as many people I know have been saying in the comments, and we've been describing today about, what it means to put ourselves on social media in perhaps a more authentic way. And I think one way to think about then that is for people to try and see if there's a high quality connection moment that you can build into those interactions with other people that actually make it feel more human to human rather than a sales pitch or a sales call or what happens when we ask a different kind of question. And I don't know what those are, and they have to be within the boundaries of what works for the company that you're working for or for your own ways of interacting too. But we have, in all seriousness, we have just had a moment of connecting about something that we think is fun. And I know Adam doesn't mind us thinking about his disco dancing. And now we've had this kind of moment where we've laughed together about something. And that I think is part of it, isn't it? It's like finding those little moments of actually just humanness or something interesting or intriguing and building those into our conversations as much as we can.
Yeah, I think that this is a really interesting comment from Jess, not just because it isn't about disco, but this is...
Adam, can you read it so that our podcast listeners will know?
I can. Do we need to shift the focus of why we are connecting from self to service? Start out with connecting to help rather than to get something. Would that help in sales?
I mean, I am by no means expert here. I know there are many sales experts amongst us, but from a psychology perspective, we know that helping and feeling that we are helping others is tremendously beneficial for us too. So from that perspective, I would think it makes a lot of sense, but I think it also helps perhaps to solidify some of those connections that we have.
Yeah, it's something that sales people need time to develop those relationships, which they don't often have, and that's what then causes them to revert back to the sales messaging, which we've talked about before. It's a kind of a leadership problem within an organization rather than an individual problem. I think the individual knows what they need to do. They just don't have the time to be able to build that meaningful relationship.
Do they know what they need to do? Because I'm genuinely not sure that they do. I think it's it's reasonable to say that everybody on the call is pretty skillful at using social media to develop conversations with people. And I think that the thing that we all do is we have conversations with people, like you said, Hazel, where you're having a conversation with someone to meet someone new, to see where it goes. You're not having a conversation with somebody to put your hand in their pocket and take their wallet out necessarily. Now, maybe you will send them an invoice at some point, but that's not the only objective of having the call with somebody. And I think that part of the challenge is that people don't want to be sold to, but they do want to sell if they're in a sales role. And the idea of taking a step back from that and seeing this as interactions with people, you know, I'm not going to sell to you because you're not my target market. However, you might know somebody that is. And, you know, seeing the spread of influence, but picking up the pleasure and the joy from having those interactions with people in the now, I think it is something that salespeople need to learn to be able to do, because I don't think that they inherently get it necessarily. It's not just salespeople, it's anyone.
And conversations are two-way. So while you, as a salesperson, might be going into this with the best of intentions, I just want to help, the person receiving that message has been conditioned to have their guard up, because every other person that has come at them to initiate a conversation has done so to put their hand in their pocket, as you say. So is there a way to overcome that barrier to entry?
I think Jess's son has the answer to that question.
I think you might be right.
I think he does. But I think, coming back to your point as well, Alex, I think it can be, it doesn't serve us well potentially if we think we don't have time to make that connection. You know, I agree with you. Making meaningful relationships that sit in that sort of, you know, your 5 close relationships, that requires a great investment of time. But actually, you know, we can have meaningful interactions with people that last a number of seconds as well.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Rob.
So speaking of time and meaningful interactions, we are coming to the close of our time with you, Dr. Hazel, and this has been yet another fantastic conversation.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Round of applause.
Thank you.
Wanted to thank you for joining us again. Thank you to the audience for an engaging conversation. And of course, thank you to the panelists. If you have something to say, we want to hear from you. If you want to be on this show, we invite you to be our guest. Visit us at digitaldownload.live, where you can find the Be Our Guest segment or section and fill out an application, or you can scan the QR code on screen here.
Scan the QR code.
Scan the QR code. Yes, they have. Excellent. All right.
Yeah. Shall we
as-
apologize to Hazel for taking away from the garden, from the sunshine?
Yeah,
Thank you for spending it.
absolutely.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Hazel, as people wanted to get to know you better, how can they do that?
So please do feel free to connect with me on social media. I am Dr. Hazel Harrison, or you can visit my website, which is ThinkAvellana.com.
Excellent. Again, for everyone on the panel, from the audience, Dr. Hazel, thank you very much. This has been the Digital Download, which is Adam.
No, and I forgot to say it at the beginning of the show.
Yes, you did. The longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Thank you